So Dr. Wegen actually gave us the introduction to our next expert. Professor Dr. Wolfgang Kellner from the University of Erlangen has come here. He is then a high-class renowned speaker on this topic. He is responsible for medical physics at the University of Erlangen-Nuremberg, his specialist area, and they have discovered EMS a long time ago. Lots of EMS surveys they conducted, and they have evaluated. So we get the pleasure of being taken on board and led to the most recent findings. What can we do due to the fact that it only requires little time? Who does benefit? How, when somebody after the training says, it's good, I feel good, and I make a progress, and when scientists can underline why this is the case, it's even better. Today he would like to put a particular focus on weight reduction. So how can it be that from a scientific point of view, 20 to 30 minutes of training can trigger such dramatic weight loss processes? You can dispense with reading many studies and textbooks when you listen to Professor Wolfgang Kellner from the University Clinic of Erlangen-Nuremberg. Thank you very much for these kind words of introduction. Well, you love to hear this, these words of praise as a scientist. And I said, well, what am I to present to you? We are talking with older people. I don't know whether this is sexy for you, or do we stick with the collective group that is more or less your clientele. So here, an efficiency study I presented last year, and we dug deeper, so to speak. And the next question would be, well, whole body EMS versus high intensity training, not only based on muscle mass and, well, thigh CSA. I think we use the other microphone. Take this one. It's well tried out and tested. So, well, sorry, and I think now we can have a decent presentation. So this is the first survey. Well, okay, no matter what I do, I best stand here and don't move. So first, the first survey I would like to present to you, this is the effects of a whole body EMS training versus high intensity strength training. You know this basic approach that you use the muscles to a max and beyond. And we tried to evaluate the effects in a highly scientific way, not only based on the body mass index, but also based on the cross-sectional area of the thigh by means of a CT measurements. We recorded body fat, CSA measurements, and then cardiometabolic risk factors, metabolic syndrome, blood effects, etc. This comes from the health-oriented area, and the sample, well, as a sample, we had, well, middle-aged men between 30 and 50 that are not very sports-minded. So an ideal sample group for a whole body EMS study. And what we were interested in following the survey was the clear decrease in body fat. We would not allocate and attribute to a whole body EMS training. So our protocol is different. We've got 1.5 times 20 minutes per week, every Tuesday, for example, and every second Thursday. A little bit more than this one-time training per week in the studios. And we had clear, distinct body fat reductions we could measure, and in my opinion, so high that we cannot explain it via an acute effect. And this is what we explored in this study. So a few words on the first study. What was the rationale for initiating and conducting the study in the first place? I'm not a medical fundamental physicist. No, I'm also a sports scientist. What annoys me is some statements, as I read here, that EMS gives us an up to 18 times the efficiency versus conventional fitness training. And this statement is simply wrong. Everybody's aware of that. We are, of course, talking about an 18 times higher CEK concentration after the whole body EMS compared with conventional strength training, and I would not then link it up to the normal endpoints, the result points of muscle mass, etc. So what can whole body EMS, what can it do versus an established HIT protocol, where we know that we've got some effects regarding muscle mass, force. The question is the methodology I mentioned. Not very sports-minded men between 30 and 50. We had here a 14-week training with a HIT protocol, and what is the common denominator is time effectiveness, and they are suited for men with little time. So whole body EMS, the normal thing, dynamic, intermittent, 250 microseconds, and then intermittent, 6 seconds current, 4 seconds break, then impulse increase. You know about the problems in whole body EMS is intensity control, and we love to take subjective loads, and so we took the CSA scale. 10 is impossible, 7 would be very hard plus. So it's really an intensive level, and we've got a high inducive force range up to maximum load and beyond, but I have got 1.5 times a week here, 2 to 3 times a week, measurements, the whole anthropometry with the so-called DXA method, golden standard method, then the cross-sectional area, thigh via the CT method, dynamic leg power, the cardiometabolic risk factors, then blood pressure, blood lipids, cholesterol field, whatever comes in this particular field of a metabolic syndrome, and then excluding disruptive factors that could have an impact on our findings. Very briefly, the force protocol of the HIT group, what you can see is highly ambitious, reduction sets, the same group of muscles was worked several times, whatever is necessary for a HIT training in terms of strategy. That was very briefly here, the basal characteristics of the groups. Important is that the age, height, weight, comparable, and the message sent out from the midst of our society. Normal men between 30 and 50 are actually overweight. You can clearly see it here. 65 to 74% were overweight based on BMI. So normal standard men, not very active in terms of sports. They were trained. Here are the results. I am walking you through very quickly. You can see that in red is the whole body EMS group. Here the medium value, a certain variance as a standard variance, turquoise. This is the HIT training group, and here's the change, the percentage change listed. What you can see is that you see nothing, which means HIT training and full whole body EMS is comparable, which in my opinion was a surprise, because HIT training, in my opinion, was favored by me. So regarding the fat-free mass, for legs, for arms, here that would be muscle mass as such. Here cross-sectional area, medial thigh, comparable effects in a highly effective, clinically highly relevant area without any doubt. And here maybe also very interesting to you, a whole body fat in percentage, in kilogram, a similar effect actually regarding the dimensions. The fat reduced was just like as muscle mass mass was generated. So no major impact on the weight. It's always a disadvantage when you only measure weight, but in detail you have wonderful results. Here the results for cardiometabolic variables. The metabolic syndrome is a summary of risk factors you can see more clearly right here. And between the HIIT of strength training and whole body EMS, always comparable values and levels, highly comparable indeed. Never ever, as the asterisks show, never ever significant differences between the group, more than random differences between the two groups. As to glucose, even the HIIT group was a little bit better off. This is the only outlier, so to speak, but we have to say that glucose amongst the men's, the sample wasn't increased. So by and large, I think that the data are beautiful. Abdominal fat, and ladies and gentlemen, well, what does it mean? Abdominal fat, visceral fat is the root of all evil in the cardiometabolic area. This is really the case, and you see comparable effect in the clinically highly relevant area. We've got nearly 5% between the two subgroups, high in intensive training and EMS. What is important is also strength, and this also plays a role right here amongst the sample group. You see clear differences favoring strength training related to dynamic groups of muscle. This is expectable. We had slight movements with EMS, but the dynamic muscles respond more favorable to a highly dynamic training compared with a less dynamic training. Here, vice versa, methodological muscles and the torso force comparable effects of a whole body EMS and HIIT training. Time efficiency is a topic here. And here, a whole body EMS is much more time efficient than a HIIT training, referring to a unit 20 minutes. That is whole body EMS application duration, and the highly time efficient training 30 minutes, 1.5 to 2 to 3 times training a week, which was necessary for HIIT training. And there we've got twice the amount of time needed. Then shower, etc. Whether I don't answer this question, whether it's so much more time efficient, well, is something you may judge for yourself. But looking at the data themselves, it's much more time efficient. The conclusion we drew is there were no relevant differences between the highly intensive and the whole body EMS regarding the parameters of body composition, and then cross-section, muscle force, and cardiometabolic risk factors. What we found, there were no impacting factors, influencing parameters we can attribute the effects to. So it may be directly attributed to the HIIT or the whole body EMS. So both training methods are suitable for increasing performance, health, and the physical attractiveness in non-trained men who are middle-aged. The study was conducted with men. I think when we draw conclusions to women, it may be allowed to do so, even though we can say that there is much less enthusiasm for HIIT strength training amongst these groups. So women would have been the more applicable and better group. What I would like to talk about now is that it's really remarkable that we've got the relatively high impact on the body fat content. And let me repeat it again. This impact on the body fat content based on the low training volume is something that is amazing. At first glance after the study, we couldn't explain what the variables, the parameters involved could be. Why could it be that a 20-minute whole body EMS protocol 1.5 times a week has got such considerable impact on the body fat content. So it's remarkable what we found, and we examined this particular questions. We had sub-studies. How do we explain it? A few basics on my part so that I can take you along. What are the parameters of our energy burning, the energy household, the budget? We've got the acute energy consumption during the exercise via muscle activity. You have to provide energy to the muscles, so the so-called afterburn effect, which means that you conclude the strain and now the body initiates regeneration, the adaptation processes, always requiring energy, no doubt about it. And then last, but by no means less, is the increase in the resting metabolic rate. So the increase in muscle mass with the EMS is a law, at least in our studies, and the muscle wants to receive energy also while resting. So the resting metabolic rate goes up, and this improves the energy balance. So we go through bit by bit which impact do the individual parameters have. First of all, so to some degree disappointing, the acute energy consumption with whole body EMS is there, and well, it's recorded via indirect calorimetry, gas exchange parameters, VO2 parameters. And to us, it was really disappointing when we take a closer look at what was happening. And I sum it up. It's a usual protocol. We know the way we did it in the predecessor study. The energy consumption during the exercises, squatting, variations with arm movements, no additional loads, with and without EMS, movement without and ones with EMS, on and off, and the weather was marginal. Even if we extrapolated it to 1 hour, it was 412. I calculate based on kilocalories and not joule. Sorry for that, but kilocalories is something that rings more of a bell with me. 412 kilocalories to 452. So the net effect with or without EMS is shockingly low. And this is something you have to think about when you have a result like this. But when we jump towards strength training there, we also have very low levels of energy consumptions we measure. And this is also due to the method of measurements applied. You know, strength training needs, is conducted via mitochondria, and indirect calories can only be measured via oxygen needs. What is made available in an anaerobic way is a factor you cannot reach. So we cannot really say what's happening, but giving a volume of 20 minutes 1.5 times a week, there's not a lot you can expect in this particular area. You have to be very clear about it. It seems to be the fact that the other parameters are more influential here, and indeed this is the case. Here, women, 30 women, 50 to 60 years old, who were experienced in strength training. We applied whole body EMS, the usual program. I'm not going to elaborate on it anymore. So what about the result regarding the basal metabolic rate? We measured their metabolic rate lying and after the end of the 14 weeks, and we again measured the basal metabolic rate. Focus on this value right here, because we differentiated it via measurements, indirect calorimetry, and it wasn't recorded under strain, but not anaerobic. And during this measurement, on this measurement we can rely, and this corresponds to about 70 kilocalories per day. And you might say, oh, it's not a lot, but you've got it day by day, week by week, every month, every year. And then, well, it adds up, so to speak, and then you've got plenty at the end of the day. Let's do some extrapolation. Well, it has to be about 7 days a week, nearly 500 kilocalories per week. That would give us 25 kilocalories per year. And most of you know what 1 kilocalorie kilogram of fat has in terms of fat mass. It's 7,000 kilocalories. And so this gives you the calculation as to whether you conduct EMS or not. It has got a considerable impact on the body fat content. We've been aware of this for 1 year, but most interesting was the last effect. I don't know whether EPOC is something that rings a bell with you. It's the so-called excessive post-oxygen consumption, an afterburn effect after strain. And this is something we focused on in particular, which means 13 men, 3 women between 25 and 50 years of age. It's a randomized study. We conducted the usual protocol, one-time application, and then the basal metabolic rate prior to and post EMS strain, and then after 12, 24, 36, 48, 60, 72 hours to measure the short to medium term effect on the basal metabolic rate, and that is the calorie consumption, the number of calories burned. Well, highly standardized, nutrition standardized, measurements good. So far so good. And maybe it's a little bit small. I hope everybody can read it. Here we've got the axis, a change of energy consumption in percent. Here the 0 line, and the same persons also spent 1 week without EMS, and the measurements were done. Here the situation without EMS, not astonishing, not a lot happens. It varies, it goes a little bit up, a little bit down, around the normal basic metabolic rate. And here a whole body EMS application, you see the difference between the groups. It's a distinct one, up to 48, 60 hours post EMS application. And here we've got a clearly higher energy consumption via after EMS compared with, without EMS. We don't have it. And when we go up and do our projections, absolute energy consumptions, we had a mean overall energy consumption throughout the day. After 72 hours, you saw clear differences, and better we focus on this graph right here. We printed it out in figures, and what you can see is 24 hours, a whole body EMS group after 1 day. The calories burned 2,400, here 2,100, so 300 kilocalories net after 48 hours and 72 hours. That gives us then 450 kilocalories net difference between EMS application and, the non-application. And this gives us something and has an impact. And now let me give you another calculation. When we add up all the parameters here, the acute effect to start with of whole body EMS application, as I said, it's difficult to estimate it, and we took a very low value for our calculations, and that would give us, 135 kilograms times 1.5 per week divided by the days of the week. It's 30 kilocalories per day. It's not a lot, not much to talk about, but maybe we underestimate the effect via our measurement methods. What is a lot more is the increase in muscle mass. We talk about 75 kilocalories, an average increase of muscle mass across our studies, men and women. Maybe this effect is also underestimated, but we want to be conservative in our calculations. And here, regarding the post-burn, the post-exercise effect, 95 kilocalories, this gives us 200 kilocalories a day. You could say, 7,000 steps more. I also get this, but are you going to do the 7,000 steps more? You won't do it. So it's a time efficient and effective training, 1.5 times a week and 200 kilocalories per day. Realized this way is highly remarkable, in my opinion. And this has an impact, quite obviously, on body fat and visceral fat content. So this turns into something which relatively well and easily explained how we achieve the relatively high body fat reductions after regular EMS applications after a period of between 12 and 14 weeks. All in all, whole body EMS I would like to underline is a extremely time efficient and highly efficient training method for improving body composition and strength. And apart from the musculoskeletal effect, we also see cardiometabolic effects, which have a positive effect mainly generated via the reduction of the body fat content, in particular the visceral fat content. And due to the very low strain on the joints, in particular for the elderly, it is suitable for people with considerable orthopedic limitations. Lots of providers haven't got it on their agenda at all. The elderly, those who suffer from tremendous orthopedic limitations, it works quite well because the arbitrary physical strain is left out and that the current does the job, which is the name of the game. We know that whole body EMS per se cannot replace endurance training, just as strength training cannot replace endurance training. Many do endurance training under the application of current. I think it's not a very favorable development. Who's done it before knows that. Well, you can you can fill your washing machines with all the clothing every 2 days. There's no method that can do it all, and EMS neither. In competitive sports where every second counts, it's adopted. I'm not sure. I leave it to the individual user whether endurance sport and EMS as well as sensible training measures. Well, this is something, that's for you to answer. When you have reasonable training and reasonable training progression, this has to be guaranteed. So you should always bear in mind the contraindications, relevant behavioral rules. You should do it ideally in a certified studio, so whole body EMS for health reasons doesn't pose any problem, and this is what I support. But the framework conditions have to be complied with. This is essential when you've got whole body EMS. There is no form of training where the customer is so exposed to the trainer and dependent on the trainer. You need a well-trained, qualified, and highly responsible trainer, because the interaction between a trainer and the customer and user is essential, not only in terms of safety, but also in terms of efficiency. And with this, I come to an end of my presentation. So EMS is available to everybody who can no longer, or does not want to perform conventional strength training anymore. Thank you very much.